The space station hung in the darkness like a giant metal flower. Its arms stretched out in all directions, each one holding docking bays for ships from across the galaxy. Today, those bays were full. Representatives from 12 different alien species had come to Kepler Haven for the most important trade meeting in 50 years. Jake Morrison stood at the window of the human shuttle, watching the massive station grow larger as they approached. Behind him, his team prepared for what would be the hardest negotiations of their careers. Earth and its colonies needed these trade deals. Without them, human settlements on the outer rim would struggle to survive. "Look at that," said Lisa Hayes, joining him at the window. She was his military advisor, a woman who had served on 3 different worlds and knew how to handle herself in any situation. "I count at least 40 ships. Some of them are bigger than our entire fleet." Jake nodded. The Crexani war cruiser alone was the size of a small city. Its black hull was covered in weapon ports and armor plating that gleamed under the station's lights. Next to it sat a Veltar bioship that looked more like a living creature than a machine. Its surface pulsed with soft blue light that moved in patterns too complex for human eyes to follow. "Remember," Jake said quietly, "we're here as equals, no matter what they think of us." The shuttle docked with a soft thud. As they walked through the airlock, Jake could hear the sound of many different languages echoing through the station's corridors. The universal translators in their ears turned the alien speech into words they could understand, but the tone was clear enough. Laughter, mockery, dismissal. They followed the signs to Conference Room Alpha, passing groups of aliens who stopped talking when they saw the humans. The Tormech delegates towered over everyone else, their crystal bodies catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns on the walls. A group of small, furry Zephyrians chittered among themselves, their large eyes watching the humans with obvious curiosity. The conference room was enormous, with a circular table that could seat over 100 beings. The humans found their assigned seats at the far end, away from the center where the most important delegates sat. It was a clear message about where humanity stood in the galactic community. War leader Thekros of the Crexani sat directly across from them. He was 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor that looked like black metal. His forearms moved independently as he sorted through data tablets, and his mandibles clicked softly as he read. When he looked up and saw the humans, his mandibles spread wide in what might have been a smile. "So," he said, his voice deep and rough, "the Deathworlders have arrived." Other delegates turned to look. The Veltar representative, whose name Jake couldn't pronounce, pulsed with colors that the translator said meant amusement. The massive Tormech delegate called Shardsinger Vox resonated with a sound like wind chimes, which apparently passed for laughter among his people. "We prefer to be called humans," Jake said politely. "Of course you do," Thekros replied. "Tell me, human, what weapons did you bring to this peaceful negotiation?" It was a strange question, but Jake had studied Crexani culture. For them, showing weapons was a sign of strength and honor. "We brought what we always bring, standard sidearms and personal defense equipment." "Standard sidearms," repeated the Veltar, colors shifting rapidly across its surface. "Chemical projectile weapons, I assume. How wonderfully primitive." A murmur of laughter went around the table. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. Lisa, sitting beside him, showed no emotion at all. The meeting began with introductions. Each species presented their achievements and capabilities. The Crexani boasted about their quantum disruptors and neural warfare systems. The Veltar described biotechnology that could reshape entire planets. The Tormech spoke of mining operations that could hollow out moons in a matter of days. When it came time for the humans to speak, Jake stood up. "We're here to discuss mutual trade benefits," he began. "Earth and its colonies offer agricultural products, manufactured goods, and—" "Agricultural products?" interrupted Thekros. "You mean food? How quaint. Do you still dig in the dirt with primitive tools?" More laughter. The Zephyrian trade minister made a sound that the translator rendered as giggling. Even the usually silent machine representatives from the Nexus Collective emitted electronic sounds that seemed amused. "We use modern farming techniques," Jake said carefully. Our food production is quite efficient. I'm sure it is, said the Veltar, for a species that still lives on the surface of planets instead of properly adapting to space environments. Jake tried to continue with his presentation, but the interruptions kept coming. When he mentioned human manufacturing capabilities, Shard Singer Vox noted that humans still used crude metallurgy instead of proper molecular assembly. When he brought up human medical advances, the Krexani laughed about species that couldn't even regenerate lost limbs. The worst part was the discussion of military cooperation. Jake had hoped to establish mutual defense agreements, but the reaction was immediate and harsh. Military cooperation? Thekros stood up, his full height making him loom over the table. What could your species possibly offer? You still use kinetic weapons, bullets and explosives. How do you expect to fight alongside civilized species? Our weapons are effective, Lisa said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken since the meeting began. Effective? The war leader's mandibles clicked rapidly. Against what? Other primitives? Your people swing metal sticks at each other like savages. I heard some of your soldiers still carry swords. The room erupted in laughter. The sound came from a dozen different species, but the meaning was universal. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. Lisa's hand moved slightly toward her belt, then stopped. Perhaps, said the Veltar smoothly, we should discuss more realistic arrangements. The human colonies could provide basic labor, raw materials, simple tasks that don't require advanced thinking. An excellent suggestion, agreed Thekros. Leave the important work to species that have actually evolved beyond their primitive origins. Jake looked around the table at the assembled delegates. Some were trying to hide their amusement. Others weren't bothering. All of them had the same expression, the look adults gave to children who were trying to play with grown-ups. He sat down slowly, his mind racing. This wasn't negotiation. This was humiliation. They had come here hoping for partnership and found only condescension. These aliens saw humanity as nothing more than a convenient source of cheap labor. Beside him, Lisa sat perfectly still. Her hand rested casually near her belt, where Jake knew she carried the sidearm that had caused so much amusement. But there was something else there too. Something the aliens hadn't noticed in their rush to mock human primitiveness. The meeting continued, but Jake barely listened. The other species divided up trade routes and mining rights as if humanity wasn't even in the room. When human interests were mentioned at all, it was as an afterthought, a small concession to keep the Deathworlders quiet. As the day wore on, Jake began to understand something important. These aliens didn't just dismiss human technology. They genuinely believed humans were inferior. They looked at Earth's history of warfare and saw only brutality. They looked at human weapons and saw only primitiveness. They looked at human adaptability and saw only stubbornness. They had no idea what they were really dealing with. The first day of negotiations ended with humanity's proposals politely filed away and forgotten. As the delegates filed out, Jake caught fragments of conversation in various alien languages. The universal translator picked up words like backward, simple, and manageable. Tomorrow, Jake realized, things were going to get much more interesting. The second day began worse than the first. Jake Morrison arrived at the conference room to find that the seating arrangement had changed. The human delegation now sat even further from the center of the table, squeezed between two empty chairs that had been marked as reserved for future species. The message was clear. Humanity ranked below species that didn't even exist yet. War leader Thekros was already speaking when the humans took their seats. His forearms gestured dramatically as he outlined a new proposal that made Jake's blood run cold. The Krexani Empire suggests a more efficient distribution of galactic resources, Thekros announced. Several human colonies occupy systems with valuable mineral deposits. These worlds would be better managed by species with proper mining technology. The Veltar representative pulsed with approving colors. An excellent point. The humans on Kepler-7 are barely scratching the surface of that world's crystal formations. My people could extract 10 times the resources in half the time. Jake shot to his feet. Those are sovereign human territories. The colonists who live there have been building those communities for over 20 years. Building? The massive Tormek delegate's crystalline body rang like a bell as he laughed. You mean those primitive structures made of processed plant matter? We have seen your colonial reports. Wooden buildings and metal sheds. How charming. More laughter rippled around the table. The small Zephyrian trade minister chittered excitedly. Perhaps the humans could be relocated to less valuable worlds, somewhere more suitable for their simple needs. We are not relocating anyone, Jake said firmly. Human colonies stay where they are. Really? Thekros stood up slowly, unfolding. To his full 8-foot height, his natural armor plates shifted as he moved, creating a soft scraping sound that set Jake's teeth on edge. And how exactly do you plan to stop us? The room fell silent. Every alien eye, sensor, and optical array focused on Jake. He could feel the weight of their attention, the predatory interest of beings who had just sensed weakness. Through diplomatic channels, Jake said carefully. Through the Galactic Trade Commission. Through legal means. Legal means, repeated Thekros, his mandibles clicking in amusement. How wonderfully civilized. Tell me, Ambassador Morrison, what happens when diplomacy fails? Jake didn't answer. He couldn't answer. Everyone in the room knew that humanity's military was a joke compared to the assembled fleets of the other species. Thought so? Thekros continued. Your species talks about sovereignty and rights, but you have no power to enforce those words. You are children playing at being adults. The Veltar's surface patterns shifted to what Jake recognized as smug satisfaction. Perhaps we should treat them as children. Give them simple tasks. Keep them safe from the dangerous complexities of galactic politics. The humans could manage agricultural worlds, suggested Shardsinger Vox. Far from anything important. They seem to enjoy digging in dirt. The condescension was suffocating. Jake felt his hands clench into fists under the table. Beside him, Lisa Hayes sat perfectly still, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. You speak of us as if we are not here, Jake said, struggling to keep his voice level. Oh, but you are here, Thekros replied, sitting at our table, breathing our air, using translation technology you could never have developed on your own. Everything about your presence here depends on the charity of superior species. The war leader began pacing around the table, his claws clicking on the metal floor. Do you know what we call species like yours in the Empire? Remnants, holdovers from primitive times. Most remnant species have the wisdom to accept their limitations. They understand their place in the natural order. He stopped directly behind Jake's chair. But humans seem to have delusions of grandeur. You actually believe you belong among advanced civilizations. It would be amusing if it weren't so pathetic. Jake turned in his chair to face the alien warrior. We belong here because we earned our place. Humanity has survived and thrived on one of the most dangerous worlds in known space. We have built colonies on dozens of planets. We have technology that works. Technology that works? Thekros laughed, a harsh barking sound. Yes, your chemical explosives and metal projectiles certainly work, for a Stone Age species. Tell me, human, do your people still settle disputes with personal combat? Do you still swing primitive weapons at each other like animals? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake could feel every alien in the room waiting for his answer. The truth was complicated. Human military training still included close combat techniques. Many soldiers did carry backup weapons for emergencies, but explaining that would only make things worse. We prefer diplomatic solutions, Jake said finally. How disappointing, Thekros replied. In Krexani culture, disputes between species can be settled through single combat. It is an ancient and honorable tradition. The stronger species proves their superiority, and the weaker accepts their proper place. Jake felt his heart rate spike. You are challenging us to single combat? Not challenging, offering a chance for your species to prove that it deserves to be treated as an equal. The war leader's mandibles spread wide. Of course, if you are too frightened to accept, we understand. Primitive species often lack courage, along with intelligence. The insult was deliberate and devastating. Around the table, alien delegates leaned forward with interest. This was better entertainment than they had expected. "What are the terms?" Lisa Hayes asked quietly. Every head turned toward her. It was only the second time she had spoken since the negotiations began, and her voice carried a calm certainty that made several aliens shift uncomfortably. "Simple terms," Thekros replied. "Single combat between representatives. No advanced technology, no energy weapons, no quantum enhancements, just natural ability and whatever primitive tools your species prefers." "And if we win?" Jake asked. "If you win," Thekros' laugh was like grinding metal, "then humanity will be treated as an equal partner in all future negotiations. Your colonies will remain under your control. Your trade proposals will be given serious consideration. And if we lose?" "When you lose," the war leader corrected, "humanity accepts its proper role as a client species. Your colonies become administered territories. Your people provide labor and resources under the guidance of superior civilizations." Jake looked around the table. The other species were nodding in agreement. The Veltar pulsed with excited colors. The Tormek resonated with anticipation. Even the usually neutral machine intelligences seemed interested in the outcome. It was a trap, of course. Thekros was a professional warrior from a species bred for combat. His natural armor, enhanced reflexes, and millennia of military tradition made him nearly unbeatable. The aliens weren't offering humanity a chance. They were offering a public execution. But it was also an opportunity. If they refused, humanity would be dismissed forever as cowards. If they accepted and lost, at least they would go down fighting. "We need time to consider," Jake began. "I accept," Lisa said calmly. The room erupted in surprised chatter. Thekros' mandibles clicked rapidly in what might have been excitement or disbelief. "Commander Hayes," Jake started. "The terms are acceptable," Lisa continued as if Jake hadn't spoken. "Single combat, no advanced technology, natural ability and traditional weapons only." Thekros studied her with 4 independent eyes. "You understand what you are agreeing to, human female. I am a trained warrior of the Krexani Empire. I have fought in 17 campaigns across 9 systems. My exoskeleton can deflect most projectile weapons. My reflexes are enhanced by combat stimulants. My claws can cut through starship hull plating." Lisa stood up slowly. She was less than half his height and probably weighed 1/10 of what he did. Next to his imposing bulk, she looked fragile and helpless. "When do we fight?" she asked. Word spread through Kepler Haven like wildfire. Within an hour, every being on the station knew about the challenge. The main cargo bay was hastily cleared and converted into an arena. Aliens who had no part in the original negotiations came to watch. Some traveled from distant sections of the station just to see the spectacle. Jake Morrison stood in the makeshift preparation area, watching technicians set up recording equipment. "Lisa, you don't have to do this. We can find another way." Lisa Hayes sat on a supply crate, calmly checking her equipment. "What other way?" "They've made their position clear. Either we prove ourselves worthy of respect, or we accept being treated as children forever." "But Thekros is a professional killer. Look at him." Through the transparent barrier, they could see the Krexani warrior preparing for combat. He had added extra armor plating to his natural shell. Energy projectors mounted. On his wrists hummed with barely contained power. Neural enhancement cables ran from his skull to a small processor on his back, glowing with data streams that would increase his reaction time beyond anything a human could match. "I see him," Lisa said quietly. 8 feet tall, 4 arms, natural, armor, enhanced reflexes, combat drugs, energy weapons. She paused. "Overconfident." Jake stared at her. "Overconfident? Lisa, he could tear apart a small starship with his bare hands." "Maybe. But he's never fought a human before. None of them have." Around the arena, betting pools had formed. Jake could see groups of aliens placing wagers on the outcome. The odds were heavily in favor of the Krexani. Some bookmakers weren't even taking bets on Lisa. The outcome seemed too certain. A Veltar merchant pulsed with colors that meant amusement as it explained the situation to a group of newly arrived Zephyrians. The human female thinks she can defeat a Krexani war leader with primitive weapons. It will be over in seconds. How do humans normally kill each other? Asked one of the Zephyrians in its high-pitched voice. Slowly and messily from what I understand, replied a Tormek observer. They use chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Very crude, very painful. The conversation was clearly meant to be overheard. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but Lisa seemed unbothered by the commentary. A station official approached their preparation area. He was a neutral mediator from the Galactic Trade Commission, chosen because his species had no stake in the outcome. Commander Hayes, he began, I must inform you that you have the right to withdraw from this challenge. War leader Thekros has agreed to accept a formal apology instead of combat. What kind of apology? Jake asked. A full acknowledgement of human inferiority, a pledge to accept client species status, a promise to evacuate the disputed colonies within 1 standard year. Lisa stood up. Tell the war leader that his offer is declined. The official's tentacles writhed with what might have been concern. Commander, please understand. Thekros has killed over 200 beings in single combat. He has never lost a challenge. His species has been perfecting warfare for millennia. This is not a contest. It is an execution. Then it should be. Over quickly, Lisa replied. The arena was ready. Spectators filled every available space on the observation levels. Jake counted representatives from over 20 different species, many of whom had come just to watch humanity's final humiliation. Thekros entered first, accompanied by the deep, rhythmic war chants of his people. The Krexani delegation sang, in harmony, their voices creating a sound like distant thunder. The war leader raised his forearms to acknowledge the crowd, his additional armor gleaming under the arena lights. He looked magnificent, terrifying, absolutely unstoppable. Lisa entered from the opposite side. She wore her standard uniform, simple black fabric with minimal protective padding. No armor, no enhancements, no visible weapons except for what appeared to be an ancient piece of metal hanging from her belt. The contrast was absurd. She looked like a child who had wandered into a gladiatorial arena by mistake. The crowd fell silent, then erupted in sounds that the universal translators rendered as laughter, disbelief, and pity. Several species made noises that had no human equivalent but clearly expressed amusement at the sight. Thekros stopped his victory display and stared at Lisa. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed what he was seeing. Where is your armor, soft skin? He called across the arena. Where are your weapons? Your combat enhancements? Lisa reached to her belt and drew the metal object. It was a sword, not an energy blade, not a molecular cutter, not a plasma edge, just a simple steel sword with a straight blade and a leather-wrapped handle. The silence lasted for 3 heartbeats. Then the laughter began. It started with the Zephyrians, their high-pitched giggling echoing through the arena. The Veltar joined in, their bodies pulsing with colors so bright they hurt to look at. The Tormek resonated with crystalline chimes that grew louder and louder. Even species that Jake had never seen before were making sounds of amusement. Dimbiu, machine intelligences emitted electronic squeals that passed for laughter among their kind. A delegation of gas-based beings created a sound like wind through broken glass. A sword? Thekros' voice boomed over the noise. An actual metal sword? This is what the mighty human Deathworlders bring to combat. He gestured to his own arsenal. Energy projectors, neural disruptors, razor-sharp claws that could cut through starship hull plating, combat drugs that would let him move faster than human eyes could follow. I have technology that your species couldn't develop in 1,000 years, he continued. And you bring a sharpened piece of metal? Lisa held the sword easily in one hand. The blade was plain steel, mirror-bright and perfectly straight. The crossguard was simple iron. The handle was wrapped in old leather that had been worn smooth by countless hands. It looked like something from a museum, a relic from humanity's violent past. when people actually fought each other with hand weapons instead of civilized energy-based combat. "This is your final chance to surrender," Thekros said. "I will make your death quick if you kneel now and acknowledge Krexani's superiority." Lisa tested the sword's balance with a few experimental swings. The blade cut through the air with a soft whisper that somehow carried across the entire arena. "I appreciate the offer," she said calmly, "but I think I'll keep fighting." The crowd's laughter reached a new peak. Several aliens were making sounds that Jake's translator couldn't even process. On the observation deck, he could see beings literally falling over with amusement. "Look at them," said a Veltar merchant to its companion. "They actually think that primitive weapon can compete with modern technology." "How did such a backward species ever develop space travel?" wondered a Tormech engineer. "Perhaps they stole it," suggested someone else, "or found it in a wreck." Thekros activated his combat systems. Energy crackled along his wrist projectors. Neural enhancement cables pulsed with data. Combat drug dispensers hissed as they flooded his system with performance enhancers. The war leader had become a living weapon, every system optimized for maximum lethality. His 4 eyes tracked independently, watching for any sign of movement. His reflexes were now fast enough to dodge projectile weapons. His armor could deflect energy blasts that would vaporize a human. Lisa stood 20 feet away holding an ancient sword. The arena official raised his hand. "Combat begins in 3, 2, 1. The signal was given. Thekros charged. Thekros moved like a force of nature. His enhanced muscles launched him across the arena floor in a burst of speed that should have been impossible for something his size. Energy bolts erupted from his wrist projectors, filling the air with crackling blue fire. His claws extended to their full length, razor-sharp points that could punch through starship armor. Lisa Hayes simply stepped aside. It wasn't a desperate dive or a panicked scramble. She moved with fluid grace like water flowing around a stone. Thekros thundered past her, his claws slicing empty air where she had been standing a moment before. The crowd's laughter died in their throats. The war leader spun around, his 4 arms moving independently as he fired another barrage of energy bolts. The shots came from multiple angles, designed to overwhelm any possible defense. Lisa's sword moved in a silver blur, deflecting the energy blasts with the flat of her blade. Each bolt redirected harmlessly into the arena walls, leaving scorch marks on the metal. "Impossible," whispered a Veltar observer. "Those are military-grade energy projectors. No primitive metal should be able to deflect them." But Lisa's sword was not primitive metal. The steel had been folded and refolded thousands of times, creating layers of carbon and iron that formed a structure stronger than most starship hulls. The blade had been tempered in furnaces that burned hotter than some stars. It was old technology, but it was perfected technology. Thekros charged again, this time leading with his natural claws. They were living weapons, grown from the same material as his armor, sharp enough to cut through diamond. He swung in a pattern that had killed dozens of opponents, 4 arms moving in perfect coordination. Lisa ducked under the first swipe, parried the second with her blade, spun away from the third and let the fourth pass over her head as she crouched low. Then she counterattacked. Her sword moved in a series of precise cuts that targeted the joints in Thekros' armor, not trying to penetrate the thick plating, but finding the gaps where movement required flexibility. The blade sliced through power, cables, severed neural connections, and damaged the delicate mechanisms that controlled his enhanced systems. Sparks flew from the war leader's wrist projectors as their targeting systems failed. His enhanced reflexes stuttered as neural cables were cut. Combat drugs leaked from damaged dispensers pooling on the arena floor. "How is she doing that?" demanded a Tormech engineer. "She's moving like she knows exactly where he's going to attack." She did know. Lisa had studied combat her entire adult life. She understood how bodies moved, how balance worked, how momentum carried an opponent in predictable directions. Thekros was faster and stronger, but he was also larger and heavier. Every movement he made created openings that a skilled fighter could exploit. The Krexani war leader was discovering that all his technological advantages meant nothing if he couldn't hit his target. He activated his combat pheromones, releasing chemical signals designed to cloud an opponent's judgment and slow their reactions. The air around him shimmered with psychoactive compounds that would have incapacitated most species. Lisa seemed completely unaffected. Humans had evolved on a world full of poisonous plants, toxic gases, and chemical hazards. Their bodies had developed resistance to many forms of environmental interference. What would overwhelm other species barely registered to human senses. Dekros tried neural disruptors next. Electromagnetic pulses designed to interfere with brain function and motor control. The waves rippled outward from generators built into his armor. Invisible fields that should have left Lisa confused and helpless. Instead, she pressed her attack. Her sword work became a flowing dance of steel, each movement connected to the next in patterns that had been refined over centuries of human warfare. She wasn't just fighting Dekros. She was dismantling him piece by piece. The arena had fallen completely silent. Thousands of alien spectators watched in stunned disbelief as their champion was systematically defeated by a human with an ancient weapon. "This is not possible," said the Veltar trade representative. "She has no enhancements, no technology. How is she winning?" Jake Morrison smiled grimly from the observation deck. "Because she's human." On the arena floor, Dekros was growing, desperate. His advanced systems were failing one by one. His energy weapons were offline. His neural enhancements were damaged. His armor was scored with cuts that had severed vital connections. But he was still dangerous. His natural strength was enormous. His claws were still sharp and his armor could still protect him from most attacks. He just needed to land one solid hit. He feinted with his upper arms, then swept low with his lower claws, trying to catch Lisa's legs. It was a move that had worked against countless opponents. She jumped over the sweep, landed lightly, and her sword found the power coupling that controlled his leg servos. Dekros stumbled as his left leg locked up. Lisa pressed the advantage, her blade moving in precise arcs that targeted every remaining system. She cut through the cables that powered his remaining weapons. She severed the connections to his combat drug dispensers. She damaged the neural interfaces that gave him enhanced coordination. The mighty war leader was being reduced to just another large alien with sharp claws. "Enough," he roared, abandoning all technique and charging forward with pure brute force. His massive frame should have bowled Lisa over through sheer momentum. She sidestepped at the last possible second, her sword cutting upward in a perfect diagonal slash. The blade found the gap between his chest armor and his helmet, sliding through, with surgical precision to rest against the soft tissue of his throat. Dekros froze. He could feel the cold steel pressing against his neck, right over the major blood vessels that kept him alive. One small movement and the blade would open his throat. The arena was so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. "Yield," Lisa said calmly. The war leader's four eyes fixed on her face. For the first time since the combat began, he really looked at his opponent. What he saw was not a primitive savage with a simple weapon. What he saw was a master craftsman who had turned violence into an art form. "How?" he whispered. "Practice," Lisa replied. "Lots and lots of practice." Around the arena, alien spectators stared in shocked silence. Their champion, the undefeated war leader of the Krexani Empire, stood helpless with a human sword at his throat. Everything they thought they knew about primitive species had just been proven wrong. "I yield," Dekros said quietly. Lisa stepped back and lowered her sword. The blade was unmarked, its steel surface still mirror-bright despite the battle. She had fought a technologically superior opponent and won without taking a single hit. The silence stretched on for long seconds. Then slowly, sound began to return to the arena. Not laughter this time, not mockery or derision. Something closer to awe, mixed with a healthy dose of fear. Jake Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. They had dismissed humans as primitive because they used simple weapons. They had assumed that simple meant ineffective. They were about to discover just how wrong they had been. The silence in the arena stretched on and on. Thousands of alien beings stared at the scene below. trying to process what they had just witnessed. Their greatest warrior, enhanced with the finest technology their civilization could produce, had been defeated by a human carrying a simple steel sword. Jake Morrison stepped down from the observation deck and walked onto the arena floor. His diplomatic composure was gone, replaced by something harder and more direct. This was not the polite ambassador who had tried to negotiate yesterday. This was a representative of a species that had clawed its way to the stars through pure determination. "You laughed at our primitive technology," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent arena. "You dismissed our simple weapons. You called us backward savages who had no place among civilized species." He gestured toward Lisa, who still stood ready with her sword. "But you made a fundamental mistake. You assumed that because we don't need your advanced systems to survive, we couldn't understand them. You were wrong." Bekros remained perfectly still, the blade at his throat a constant reminder of his defeat. "How?" he asked again. "My systems were perfect. My enhancements were flawless. How did your primitive weapon overcome them?" "Because it's not primitive," Lisa replied. "This sword represents 10,000 years of human warfare. Every technique, every improvement, every lesson learned in battle has been passed down and refined. What you see as simple, we see as perfected." Jake activated a small device on his wrist. Suddenly, the arena filled with holographic displays showing data that made several aliens gasp in surprise. Technical specifications, manufacturing details, performance statistics. "The steel in that blade is stronger than your armor plating," Jake explained. "It's made using techniques that your metallurgists haven't discovered yet. The folding process creates a molecular structure that can deflect energy weapons without losing its edge." A Veltar engineer pulsed with confused colors. "But our sensors detected no advanced materials, no energy signatures, no quantum enhancement." "Because there aren't any," Jake said. "We don't need quantum enhancement when we understand basic physics well enough to make it unnecessary. We don't need energy signatures when properly forged steel works better than your ceramic composites." More holographic displays appeared, showing human technological achievements that the aliens had dismissed or overlooked. Fusion reactors that operated at 98% efficiency. Medical nanobots that could repair cellular damage at the molecular level. Defensive systems that could stop projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. "This is impossible," said Shardsinger Vox, his crystalline structure resonating with disbelief. "Our analysis of human technology showed crude manufacturing techniques, simple chemical processes, basic metallurgy." "Your analysis was incomplete," Jake replied. "You looked at our technology and saw what you expected to see, primitive methods used by a backward species. You never considered that those methods might be more advanced than your own." Lisa sheathed her sword with a fluid motion that drew admiring looks from several warriors in the crowd. "We don't show off our capabilities because we don't need to prove ourselves with flashy displays. We simply do what needs to be done with whatever tools work best for the job." A small Zephyrian delegate chittered nervously. "But your weapons, we saw your military reports. Chemical projectiles, explosive warheads, Stone Age technology." "Effective technology," Lisa corrected. "A bullet that costs pennies to manufacture can disable a 1,000,000 credit energy shield if you know where to hit it. An explosive that can be made from common chemicals will stop an armored vehicle just as well as an exotic particle beam." Jake gestured to another holographic display. "We've been studying your species for years. We know the weak points in Krexani armor. We understand how Veltar biotechnology responds to electromagnetic interference. We've mapped the resonance frequencies that can shatter Tormek crystal structures." The arena erupted in alarmed chatter. Representatives from dozens of species suddenly realized that the primitive humans had been analyzing their defenses while they had been busy dismissing human capabilities. "You've been spying on us," accused a Veltar official. "We've been learning from you," Jake replied. "Just like we learn from everything else. It's what humans do. We adapt, we improve. We find ways to turn any advantage into a tool for survival." Thekaros spoke up from where he stood with Lisa's sword still at his throat. "Your combat techniques, where did they come from?" "Earth," Lisa answered. the most dangerous planet in known space. A world where everything is trying to kill you. Poisonous plants, predatory animals, natural disasters, disease, starvation, war. She paused. We learned to fight because fighting was the only way to survive. But you seem so peaceful, said a machine intelligence representative. Your diplomatic proposals focus on cooperation and mutual benefit. Because we know the cost of war, Jake explained. We've been fighting for our entire history. We understand what violence can accomplish and what it cannot. We prefer cooperation because it's more efficient than conflict. He gestured to the assembled delegates. You've built your civilizations in safe environments, stable planets with predictable weather and manageable threats. You've never had to develop the skills that come from constant danger. The holographic displays shifted to show images of Earth. Massive storms that could level cities. Volcanic eruptions that changed the climate. Ice ages that forced entire species to adapt or die. Predators that could hunt down and kill anything that moved. We didn't choose to become warriors, Lisa said. Our world made us warriors. Every human alive today is descended from survivors. People who faced impossible odds and found ways to win. Thekros looked at the images of Earth and shuddered. How does anything survive on that world? By being tougher than the world itself, Jake replied. By refusing to give up no matter how bad things get. By finding solutions that nobody else would think of. He turned to address the entire arena. You've been treating us like children because we don't use your advanced technology, but we're not children. We're the species that learned to thrive in hell. We're the people who turned the most dangerous world in the galaxy into our home. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Everything they thought they knew about humanity was being turned upside down. The primitive species they had planned to exploit was revealing itself to be something far more dangerous. So what happens now? Asked the Veltar trade representative. Jake smiled. It was not a particularly friendly expression. Now we renegotiate as equals, with full knowledge of what each species brings to the table. He gestured to Lisa, who stepped away from Thekros and sheathed her sword completely. We honor the terms of the challenge. Humanity will be treated as an equal partner in all future negotiations. Our colonies remain under our control. Our trade proposals will be given serious consideration. Thekros rubbed his throat where the sword had rested. And if we refuse to honor those terms, then you'll discover what humans are really capable of when they stop being polite, Jake replied. The war leader looked at Lisa, then at the holographic displays showing human technology, then at the images of Earth with its endless dangers. We will honor the terms, he said quietly. One by one, the other delegates nodded their agreement. The Veltar pulsed with colors that indicated submission. The Tormek resonated with tones of respect. Even the machine intelligences emitted sounds that suggested grudging admiration. Jake Morrison looked around the arena at the assembled representatives of a dozen species. They had come here expecting to divide up human territory among themselves. Instead, they had learned that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or exploited. They had learned that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look dangerous at all. The negotiations would continue tomorrow. But this time humanity would have a seat at the center of the table.